It was 3 o'clock in the morning when my phone rang. On the other end of the line, I heard my granddaughter's trembling voice. "Grandma, please help me." When I arrived at her husband's family's sprawling estate, I found my little girl locked in a room, with marks on her arms that made me understand everything. I had failed her, but there was still time to get justice. Before I continue, tell me in the comments what state or country you are watching this video from. I love knowing where you all are tuning in from. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. I am 68 years old, and for my entire life, I was known as the kind of woman who takes no nonsense from anyone. My husband used to say that I was born with a sense of justice so strong that it sometimes scared people. Maybe he was right. After I lost my daughter Sarah in a car accident in Chicago 10 years ago, I promised myself that I would protect Chloe, my granddaughter, tooth and nail. She was barely 15 years old when she was orphaned, and from then on, she became the reason for my existence. I raised Chloe alone after my husband passed away 2 years after Sarah's accident. It was not easy. A 60-year-old widow trying to understand the drama of a teenager, but we made it work. We always had a very close relationship. She told me everything, or at least that was what I thought. We spent our afternoons chatting about school, about her dreams, about life. I was present at every school play, at every graduation, at every major milestone. Chloe grew up to be beautiful and smart. She graduated with a degree in business administration, with excellent grades, and got a job at a top-tier consulting firm. At 26 years old, she was building a solid career, had a loyal circle of friends, and seemed genuinely happy. I was so incredibly proud of her. I saw my daughter Sarah in every smile, in every gesture. It was as if a part of Sarah was still alive through Chloe. It was at a corporate holiday party that Chloe met Julian Sterling. I remember when she came home that night, her eyes shining, talking about the amazing guy she had just met. Julian was a financial manager at a partner firm. According to Chloe, he was a true gentleman, educated and ambitious. He came from prominent old money, the Sterlings, who owned a network of private medical clinics spread out across 3 states, Illinois, New York, and California. The first time I met Julian was at a dinner Chloe hosted at our place, 2 months after they started dating. He arrived right on time, bringing me a bouquet of flowers and a wildly expensive bottle of wine. He was undeniably handsome, impeccably dressed, carrying that air of someone who grew up accustomed to the very best that money can buy. He spoke politely and asked about my life. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, but something in his eyes unsettled me, an emptiness I could not quite put my finger on. When he smiled, the smile never reached his eyes. When he spoke about his love for Chloe, the words felt rehearsed, as if he were reciting lines from a soap opera. I tried to brush off that feeling. After all, Chloe was so happy. Who was I to ruin that with the paranoia of an old woman? Over the next few months, I tried to get to know Julian and his family better. I was invited to dinner at the Sterling estate a few times. The property was jaw-dropping. Acres of perfectly manicured lawns in an exclusive gated community in the suburbs, a house that looked like it belonged on the cover of an architectural magazine. Julian's mother, Caroline Sterling, was a tall, elegant woman with perfectly coiffed hair and designer clothes. She treated me with a cold politeness, the kind of country club courtesy that makes it perfectly clear you are not welcome, but good manners prevent them from saying it to your face. Julian's father, Richard Sterling, was a busy man who barely made an appearance during my visits. When he did show up, he spoke mainly about business, about expanding the clinics, about profit margins and investments. The entire family seemed obsessed with status, with keeping up appearances, with maintaining a flawless image for high society. I tried to talk to Chloe about my concerns. I picked a Saturday afternoon when we were grabbing lunch at our favorite local diner, just the 2 of us. "Honey," I started carefully, "are you sure about Julian? His family seems very different from us." Chloe laughed, affectionately squeezing my hand. "Grandma, you are overreacting. I know they have money and that it can be intimidating, but Julian really loves me. He is not like his family. He is different, more sensitive, more human. And his mom? Caroline does not seem to accept you very well. She just needs time to get to know me better. She is a woman who is used to a certain lifestyle, to certain standards, but Julian says she will end up loving me, that I just need to be patient. I wanted to believe her. I wanted so badly to be wrong about that family. Chloe was all I had left in the world. If she was happy, I should be happy too, right? The marriage proposal came 6 months after they started dating. Julian organized a surprise party at a wildly expensive restaurant in downtown Manhattan. He invited friends and family. He got down on one knee with a diamond ring that must have cost more than I made in a year. Chloe said yes, crying tears of joy, and everyone clapped. I was there, smiling, but my heart felt tight. Something was telling me I was about to lose my granddaughter. But how could I say that without sounding like the controlling grandmother trying to sabotage her happiness? The wedding preparations were intense. Caroline practically hijacked everything, hiring the best caterers, picking out every single detail. Chloe barely had a say in any of the decisions. Whenever she tried to share an opinion, Caroline would politely ignore her or explain why her idea was not appropriate for a sterling family wedding. I remember one particularly tense argument over the wedding dress. Chloe wanted something simple and elegant. Caroline insisted on an extravagant gown, dripping with heavy embroidery and beading. "You have to understand, darling," Caroline said with that icy smile. "This wedding is not just about the two of you. It is about the family, about maintaining our standard. People expect a certain level of grandeur." Chloe caved, just like she always caved when the pressure was too much. The wedding took place on a sunny Saturday in March, 2 years ago. It was a massive ceremony at the Sterling family's sprawling estate in the Hamptons. 300 guests, most of them people I had never seen in my life, a live string quartet playing classical music, a setup that looked like a fairy tale, with imported flowers and crystal chandeliers installed specifically for the event. I was there, wearing the nicest dress I could afford, smiling for the photos, shaking hands with people who barely hid their shock upon discovering I was the bride's grandmother. I could see the unspoken question in their eyes. How could a simple woman like me be related to someone marrying a Sterling? During the ceremony, when the minister asked if anyone objected to the marriage, I had a crazy urge to throw my hand up, to scream that something was wrong, that this family was not good enough for my granddaughter. But I stayed quiet, watching Chloe say I do to the man who swore to love and protect her. After the ceremony, during the reception, I tried to pull Chloe aside, but she was constantly swarmed by people. When I finally managed to get a moment alone with her, I took her hands and looked deep into her eyes. "Honey, are you happy? Truly?" She smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Of course, Grandma, I am happy. Today is the happiest day of my life." But there was something in her voice, a hesitation, a shadow that made me absolutely certain. My granddaughter was making a terrible mistake, and I had done nothing to stop it. For the first few months after the wedding, Chloe still visited me often. We grabbed lunch every week at our usual diner, eating burgers and fries. We talked on the phone almost every day. She would tell me about her adjustment to married life, about what it was like living in her in-laws' mansion while they house hunted for a place of their own. But little by little, I noticed changes. The visits grew further apart. The phone calls got shorter. Whenever I asked when we would see each other again, Chloe always had an excuse. "I am just so tied up, Grandma," she would say with an exhausted voice. "Julian's family has so many social commitments. Charity galas, country club dinners, board meetings. You know how it is, right? It is just part of their world." I understood, but it did not sit right with me. I started noticing other changes too. Chloe was getting thinner, way too thin. Her face, which had always been full and rosy, was pale and sharp. Deep, dark circles bruised her eyes, making her look much older than her 26 years. That spark I had always seen in her, that inner light that made her special, was burning out. "Are you okay, sweetie?" I asked her during one of our rare lunches, about 4 months after the wedding. "You have lost so much weight. Are you eating right?" "Just exhausted from work, Grandma. It has been a rough few weeks." "And Julian, is he treating you right?" "Of course he is. He loves me so much." But the answer came out robotic, rehearsed, completely devoid of real emotion. I tried to pull more out of her, asking specific questions, but Chloe would change the subject or nervously check her cell phone. It was like she was terrified to speak, terrified to spill the tea on something she was not supposed to talk about. 3 months later, Chloe quit her job at the consulting firm. She called to give me the news, her voice bizarrely flat. "It was a joint decision, Grandma," she explained when I pressed her on it. "Julian thinks it is best that I dedicate myself to the family's projects. They are planning to expand the clinics, and they want me involved." "But you loved your career," I protested. "You worked so hard to get where you were. Things change when you get married. I have to do what is best for my marriage, for the family." Those words did not belong to her. They were words someone else had shoved into her mouth, forcing her to repeat them until she believed them. Weeks turned into months, and my contact with Chloe steadily dwindled until it practically vanished. Whenever I dialed her cell, it was often her mother-in-law, Caroline Sterling, who picked up with that freezing, overly controlled voice. "Hello, Eleanor," she would always say, as if she were doing me a massive favor by taking my call. "Chloe is resting right now. You know, she has been very sensitive lately." "She needs a lot of bed rest." Sensitive. That word started creeping into the conversations more and more. "Chloe is sensitive. Chloe needs time to herself. Chloe is not feeling well," always delivered in a tone that suggested something was mentally wrong with my granddaughter, as if she were too fragile to handle normal life. "Can I just speak to her for one tiny minute?" I would push, trying to keep my cool even though my blood was boiling. "I do not think that is a good idea today. She had an anxiety attack earlier. The doctor recommended absolute bed rest, but I promise I will tell her you called." And the call would end right there, leaving me with more questions than answers and a knot of dread in my chest that only grew tighter every single day. I tried swinging by their house a few times, dead set on seeing my granddaughter with my own 2 eyes. The Sterling estate was about an hour from my place, tucked inside a luxury-gated community wrapped in high stone walls and extreme security. It was the kind of neighborhood where regular folks like me were clearly not welcome. Out of the 5 times I showed up unannounced, they did not let me through the gates a single time. "I am sorry, ma'am," the security guard at the booth would say, in a tone that made it perfectly clear he was not sorry at all. "You need to schedule a visit in advance. Those are the family's rules. I am Chloe's grandmother. I just want to see my granddaughter for a few minutes. I understand, but the rules are strict. No prior appointment, no entry. I can call up to the main house and see if today is a good day for visitors, if you would like." He would dial, speak briefly with someone, and always return with the exact same answer. "Unfortunately, it is not a good time. Mrs. Sterling is not receiving visitors today. Booking an appointment just to see my own granddaughter. Treating me like some random stranger instead of the woman who raised that girl from the age of 15, who was there for every major moment of her life." The whole thing was completely messed up. And deep down in my soul, I knew it. But what could I do? Call the cops and report what? That my adult, married granddaughter did not want to see me? That her husband's family was being rude? There was no crime being committed, just an overwhelming gut feeling that something horrific was happening, and I was powerless to stop it. I started asking around, digging on my own. I reached out to Chloe's old coworkers, people she used to consider close friends. They all told me the exact same thing. Chloe just fell off the map one day. She stopped replying to emails, ignored texts, completely ghosted everyone in her life. I tried to keep in touch. Eleanor, Megan, who had been Chloe's best friend at the firm, told me. I texted her, called her. I even drove up to her house once. But her husband met me at the door and told me Chloe was moving on from her past friendships, that she was focusing entirely on her new life. It was super weird, you know? It did not sound like anything Chloe would ever say. I tried talking to her college friends, girls she knew from her state university days. Most of them had lost touch too. Chloe changed after she tied the knot. Eleanor, Hannah, who had known Chloe since they were 17, told me. She seemed like a totally different person the few times I actually got her on the phone, and Julian hated when she went out alone. He was always making up excuses for why she could not make it to our get-togethers. Eventually, we just stopped inviting her. My blood boiled with every conversation. I knew the red flags of an abusive relationship like the back of my hand. I had spent 30 years working as a social worker before I retired, helping women escape domestic violence situations. I knew the playbook. Isolating them from family and friends, controlling their social life, drastic personality shifts. But never, not in my darkest nightmares, did I imagine my own granddaughter would be living through that hell. And the worst part was, I could not get to her. It was as if they had built a brick wall around her, and I was stuck on the outside, screaming my lungs out, but my voice couldn't break through. 3 months ago, on a Sunday morning, my phone finally rang. Chloe's name popped up on the caller ID. I snatched it up on the first ring, my heart pounding out of my chest. "Chloe? Honey, is that you?" On the other end, I heard sobbing. My granddaughter was crying, that kind of gut-wrenching wail that comes from the depths of your soul. "Grandma." She managed to choke out between sobs. "Grandma, I need to see you. Please." "Of course, honey. Where are you?" "I am coming to get you right now. I cannot leave, Julian. He won't let me." He locked my car. He took my smartphone. This is an old burner phone I found shoved in a drawer. "But I need to tell you something. I need to." Before she could finish, I heard a man's voice in the background, sharp and furious. "Who the hell are you talking to?" Chloe's voice flipped instantly, turning into this artificial, forced cheerfulness. "Just my grandma, babe. We were just setting up lunch for next week." I heard a thud, like the phone had been slapped to the floor, muffled voices arguing. Then, the line went dead. "Chloe! Chloe!" I screamed into the receiver, but nobody was there. The call had been disconnected. I tried calling right back. The phone rang once and went straight to voicemail. I dialed again. Same thing. I kept trying for hours, leaving frantic voicemails, begging her to call me back, to just tell me she was safe. She never called. I spent that night, and the weeks that followed, trying to reach her by any means necessary. I called the Sterling Estates landline dozens of times. Caroline always answered, always spinning the same web of lies. Chloe was indisposed, she was resting, she could not come to the phone. I sent texts to Chloe's cell, all delivered, none read. I mailed letters through the post office. I never got a reply. I drove back up to the gated community, this time getting louder, demanding they let me through. "Ma'am, if you keep causing a disturbance, I am going to have to call the police." The guard threatened me. "Call them. Call the cops. You are holding my granddaughter hostage in there." But he didn't call, and eventually I had to drive away, fuming and utterly helpless. I sought legal advice. I booked a consultation with a lawyer an old coworker recommended. I laid out the entire situation, the creeping isolation, the personality changes, the desperate phone call, my total inability to make contact. The lawyer, a middle-aged guy with a sympathetic look in his eyes, listened patiently. Then, with the gentle tone of someone about to deliver terrible news, he laid out the reality. "Eleanor, I hear your concern. As a grandmother, it has got to be agonizing. But technically, Chloe is a 26-year-old adult. She is legally married. If she does not file a formal domestic abuse report, if she does not actively seek out help, our hands are legally tied. But they are holding her against her will," I argued, feeling hot tears of frustration stinging my eyes. I heard it in her voice. "She is terrified. I believe you. But we need hard evidence. One dropped phone call is not going to cut it. If you could speak to her face to face, document visible signs of abuse. They won't let me within a mile of her. Unfortunately, that is their right. It is private property, unless we get a court order. And to get a judge to sign off on a warrant, we need concrete proof that a crime is actively taking place." It was an impossible catch. 2-2. To help Chloe, I needed proof. To get the proof, I needed access to her. But to get access, I needed proof. I walked out of that law office feeling completely defeated. But that defeat only lasted until I walked through my front door. Standing there, looking at the framed photos of Chloe scattered across my living room, Chloe as a little girl, Chloe as a teenager, Chloe holding her college diploma, I made a choice. If the justice system was not going to help me, I was going to have to find another way. I decided to launch my own investigation, gather the evidence I needed, and expose exactly what that family was doing to my granddaughter. I started digging into everything I could find online about the Sterling family and their medical empire. On the surface, it all looked pristine, almost too good to be true. Healthcare Excellence Awards, Board of Health certifications, glowing patient testimonials plastered all over their official website, glossy photos of luxurious facilities that looked more like 5-star resorts than medical clinics. But when I scratched deeper, using advanced search tactics and consumer watchdog forums, I found cracks in their shiny armor. There were old complaints, mostly scrubbed from the web or marked as resolved, but still lingering on archived internet pages. I found records of labor lawsuits that never went to trial, all mysteriously dropped or settled with ironclad NDAs. Former staff who vanished from the clinics overnight. Some with very public grievances that were suddenly swept under the rug without a trace. A pattern was staring me right in the face. The Sterling clinics had a closet full of skeletons they desperately wanted to keep hidden. I made a list of all the former employees I could identify through professional networks and job boards. There were 17 people who had worked at the network's 5 clinics over the last 5 years and left under shady circumstances. I started reaching out to every single one of them. Most ignored my messages. A few blocked my profile immediately. But 3 people agreed to talk, on the condition that we met in person at discreet public locations. The first was Emily Davis, a nurse who had worked at the flagship clinic for 3 years before getting the axe. We met at a small coffee shop in a distant suburb. She showed up looking jumpy, constantly glancing over her shoulder like she expected a tail. "Eleanor?" She started after we ordered our coffees, her hands physically shaking as she gripped her mug. "I need you to understand something before we talk. I signed a massive non-disclosure agreement when they let me go. If they find out I am talking to you, they will sue me into oblivion. They will completely bankrupt me. I understand the risk you are taking, and I cannot thank you enough for meeting with me." She took a deep breath, took a long sip of her coffee, and started spilling the truth. "That family is toxic, Eleanor. They are deeply connected. Judges, police chiefs, heavy-hitting politicians. I saw horrifying things happening in those wards, but when I tried to blow the whistle internally, I was fired the very next morning. They framed me, claiming I was stealing narcotics. I have never stolen a thing in my life. What kind of things did you see?" She checked over her shoulder again before continuing, dropping her voice to a near whisper. "Inappropriate medications being pushed on patients. People kept locked up way longer than medically necessary because the longer a bed was filled, the more cash the family raked in. Doctored diagnoses, falsified lab results used to justify insanely expensive, pointless treatments." My stomach flipped. And the patients did not complain? Did they not try to check out? They heavily sedated them. Or they would tweak their charts to claim they were a suicide risk, which gave the clinic the legal loophole to hold them on an involuntary psych hold. I watched families get totally manipulated, brainwashed into believing their loved ones were too unstable to be discharged, and nobody raised a red flag? Her face turned to stone, her eyes welled up with tears. A coworker of mine, a nursing tech named Andrea, started asking way too many questions about certain procedures. She had been there 6 years. 2 weeks after she threatened to take documents to the Department of Public Health, security magically found illegal drugs planted in her purse during a routine locker check. They fired her for gross misconduct. She lost her nursing license. They absolutely ruined her life. We all knew it was a setup, but who is going to go to war with the Sterlings? "Do you have any proof of this?" She shook her head. "They escorted me out of the building without letting me grab my stuff. But I know other staff took pictures, recorded audio. The problem is everyone is too terrified to go on the record." I walked out of that coffee shop with more questions than answers, but it confirmed my darkest fears. This family was running a criminal enterprise, and Chloe was trapped inside it. The second former employee was Dr. Benjamin Carter, a physician who worked at the family's rehab center for 2 years. We met at a public park. He specifically chose an isolated bench far away from any security cameras. "I took that job thinking I was going to save lives," he told me, his face etched with heavy guilt and regret. "It took me exactly 3 months to realize the whole place was a massive insurance fraud operation disguised as a wellness retreat." "What do you mean by that?" Patients coming in with mild burnout or generalized anxiety were being slapped with severe psychiatric disorder labels. Executives checking in to manage stress were suddenly committed under the guise of psychotic breaks. And once they were checked in, we pumped them full of such heavy psych meds that they actually developed the severe symptoms we needed to legally justify keeping them locked up. I felt bile rising in my throat. "That is monstrous. That is flat out illegal." "I tried to push back," he said. "Caroline Sterling called me into her office personally. She told me, And I will never forget these exact words she told me. They were paying me a premium salary to follow protocols, not to have opinions. When I argued that this violated my Hippocratic oath, she casually reminded me about her powerful friends and that my medical license depended entirely on my cooperation. Did you walk away? I handed in my resignation the next morning, but I signed an ironclad NDA in exchange for a massive severance package. They basically bribed me to keep my mouth shut. And I took it because I was scared. He looked at me with haunted eyes. I know I was a coward. I have to live with that guilt every single day. Is your granddaughter in there? He asked out of nowhere. The question caught me off guard. How did you know? Because you are out here playing detective. Because I can see the exact same desperate look in your eyes that I saw in the faces of other families trying to pull their kids out of that nightmare. He paused. How long has she been in? I am not entirely sure. A few months at least. He shook his head, looking grim. The longer she stays, the harder it will be. The cocktails they push cause severe chemical dependency. The brain rewires itself. When someone finally gets out, if they ever get out, they are left with brutal side effects. Neurological damage, cognitive fog, complete personality shifts, sometimes permanent. Those words hit me like a freight train. Every single day that ticked by, my granddaughter was being damaged in ways that might never be fully reversed. The third person who agreed to speak was Rachel Moore, a former psychologist at the clinic. We met at her house after she insisted it was safer than any public space. I worked there for 4 years, she told me, as we sipped tea in her kitchen. I walked in full of idealism, wanting to help people battle addiction and trauma. I walked out feeling like I was complicit in war crimes. She told me about patients being forced into experimental off-book therapies backed by zero actual science. About private therapy sessions being secretly recorded and later weaponized to gaslight the patients' families. About medical charts being completely fabricated to justify indefinite holds. There was this one patient, Rachel told me, her voice cracking, young, gorgeous, brilliant girl. Her husband's family had her committed, claiming she had a severe personality disorder, but after 5 minutes of talking to her, it was painfully obvious she was completely sane, just wildly depressed about being locked up against her will. I brought my clinical assessment to the board. They told me to stop getting emotionally invested and stick to the approved treatment plan. What happened to her? She was locked in there for 6 months. When they finally discharged her, she was a shell of a human being, completely dead behind the eyes. The drugs had literally erased whoever she used to be. That description chilled me to the bone. Was that what was happening to Chloe? Was she being chemically hollowed out? I spent the next few weeks processing everything I had learned, trying to figure out my next move. I had anecdotal evidence, testimonies from former staff, but nothing solid enough to drop on the district attorney's desk, especially knowing the Sterlings had the local police in their back pocket. That was when I got the text message that changed the game. It came from an unknown number, sent through an encrypted messaging app. Eleanor, I am a friend of Chloe's. I work at the clinic where they are holding her. I cannot say much, but she needs you. Right now, they are planning on transferring her to another unit far away, up to upstate New York. Please, get her out of here. My heart raced. I texted back instantly. Who is this? How did you get my number? Does not matter. All that matters is Chloe is in serious danger. She slipped me your number months ago. Made me swear I would warn you if things went south. They have gone very south. Go get her. Where exactly is she? The recovery clinic in the Berkshires. 3rd floor, West Wing. But you have to move fast. Tomorrow might be too late. The chat ended right there. The user blocked the number and vanished. But I had the smoking gun, Chloe's exact location, and a ticking clock. I spent that entire night wide awake, plotting. I knew I did not have the luxury of time to build a rock-solid legal case. If they were moving Chloe, I had to strike immediately. And if that meant breaking the law, then so be it. I called up a private investigator an old buddy from the department had recommended. I gave him the short version over the phone. He agreed to meet me the very next morning. Jack Reynolds was a guy in his 50s, a retired cop who set up his own PI firm after turning in his badge. We met at a diner near my place, and I laid everything out on the table. Every single detail, From the wedding day to the burner phone call to the encrypted text, he listened quietly, jotting down notes. When I was done, he sat back, chewing on it for a minute before speaking. "Eleanor, I am going to shoot straight with you. What you are asking me to pull off is a felony. Breaking and entering into a private medical facility, extracting a committed patient even if she is your own blood. You could go to federal prison for this. I know. But I am not leaving my granddaughter in that hellhole for one more day. If they lock me up, fine. At least I will be able to sleep at night knowing I went down swinging." He studied my face, looking for any sign of hesitation. He didn't find any. "All right, I am in. But we are doing this by the book, meticulously. Going in guns blazing is just going to get us all thrown in a cell." We spent the rest of that day and the entire next day drawing up the playbook. Jack pulled the building's original blueprints from public zoning records. We mapped out entry points, blind spots, emergency exits, and shift changes. "The graveyard shift is our sweet spot," Jack explained. "Skeleton crew, guards watching Netflix. Sometime between 2 and 4 in the morning is our best window." But there was a massive hurdle. How do we bluff our way past the front gate? The compound had motorized steel gates, high-def cameras, and armed private security. You couldn't just kick the front door in. That was when Jack had a light bulb moment. "I got a buddy who runs a commercial HVAC maintenance company. These luxury clinics run on massive central air systems and have round-the-clock service contracts. If we mock up some uniforms and fake IDs, it took us 2 days to get the gear together. Authentic-looking polo shirts from a real HVAC company, forged, highly convincing employee badges, a beat-up commercial van slapped with magnetic company decals, even heavy tool bags to sell the con. If anyone actually calls the real company dispatch to verify us, we are burned instantly," Jack warned me. "So we have to move like lightning. In, grab Chloe, out. 15 minutes, tops." We set the drop for Tuesday night, 3 days after I got the anonymous tip. Jack was coming with me. He was bringing his trusted right-hand man, an ex-cop named Mike. 3 of us to make sure we got Chloe out alive. The night before the raid, I packed a duffel bag with clean clothes for Chloe, her birth certificate, and a stack of cash. I set up a safe house, the home of my friend Dottie, 40 years of friendship, who agreed to hide us no questions asked. I also sat down and wrote a letter, just in case everything blew up in my face. In case I caught a bullet or a jail cell, I documented everything I had uncovered about the Sterling Empire. I named every whistleblower who had spoken to me. I attached flash drives with all my notes. I handed the envelope to Dottie with strict orders to take it straight to the district attorney if I didn't make it back. "You are coming back," Dottie told me fiercely, pulling me into a hug. "You are bringing Chloe home." I prayed she was right. Tuesday rolled around. I spent the day trying to keep a lid on my anxiety, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. I ran through the floor plan dozens of times, checked and rechecked Chloe's go bag. I called Jack 3 times just to confirm we were green. "Eleanor, breathe," he told me on the 3rd call. "Jitters are going to get us killed. You need ice in your veins tonight." He was right. I forced myself to sit down and meditate, something I hadn't done since the 70s. I sat in the dead quiet of my living room, staring at Chloe's graduation photo, praying to God to give me the guts to do what needed to be done. At 11 o'clock at night, Jack pulled up. Mike was already in the passenger seat, geared up. I threw on my uniform. Navy blue cargo pants, a heavy polo shirt with the HVAC logo. Jack handed me a laminated fake ID badge with my face on it. "If anybody asks, you are the senior climate control inspector," he briefed me as we hit the highway. "You are here to diagnose a critical system failure on the 3rd floor. Walk with purpose. People who look like they belong there don't get questioned." The drive out to the Berkshires took over an hour. We hit the clinic's perimeter around 1 o'clock in the morning. Jack killed the headlights and parked the van on a side street a few blocks away. "Let's run it back one last time," he said, turning around to face Mike and me. We roll up to the guard shack, claiming we got an automated dispatch for a critical HVAC failure. I do the talking, you 2 nod, and look annoyed to be working a graveyard shift. If the gate goes up, we beeline for the 3rd floor. "Eleanor, you got the room number?" I had burned that blueprint into my brain. Room 307, West Wing, bingo. We hit the room, we grab the girl, we tell the floor nurse we have to temporarily evacuate the room due to an acute freon leak. We walk out before anyone can second guess it. Any questions? Mike unzipped his heavy canvas tool bag. It looked professional, but the only tools inside were bolt cutters and a crowbar. What if they try to play hero? We improvise, but keep it clean. Force is an absolute last resort to protect Eleanor or the girl. I took a deep breath. I am ready. We rolled up to the front gates. It was an imposing fortress, wrought iron with gold accents, and a brightly lit guard shack. Jack tapped the horn politely. A security guard stepped out, looking half asleep. Jack rolled down his window. Evening, brother. Apex Climate Control. We just got an automated critical failure alert on the main handler for the 3rd floor. The guard frowned, checking his clipboard. I don't have any maintenance scheduled for tonight. It's an emergency dispatch, Jack said, his tone dripping with blue-collar annoyance. Your remote sensors are throwing a critical pressure warning. If I don't bleed the valves in the next hour, your entire 3rd floor is going to lose AC, and the compressor is going to fry. I am guessing your bosses don't want a ward full of VIP patients waking up in a sauna, right? It worked. Dropping the patient risk card always makes healthcare security nervous about liability. The guard hesitated, then grabbed his radio and called the front desk inside. He spoke for a few seconds, looked at our van, scanned our uniforms, hung up the radio. All right, you are clear, but I need to log the visit. Let me see everybody's badges. We flashed our fakes. He scribbled the names onto a clipboard, then hit the button. The massive iron gates swung open. Park around the side. Staff entrance. Desk nurse will meet you there. The gate closed, shut behind us. We were past the point of no return. Jack backed the van into the loading dock. We hopped out, slinging the heavy tool bags over our shoulders. An overnight nurse was waiting at the glass doors. She looked extremely annoyed about being bothered. What exactly is the issue? She snapped. 3rd floor thermal sensors are completely redlining. Jack fired back with practiced confidence. We need to check the central ducting on that floor. She sighed heavily. 3rd floor. Follow me. We stepped inside. The lobby was sickeningly opulent. It looked more like a Ritz-Carlton than a hospital. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, abstract art on the walls. We trailed her to the elevator bank. Keep it down, she ordered as the doors closed. The patients are highly sedated. You got it, I said, forcing my voice an octave lower. The elevator dinged at the 3rd floor. The doors slid open to a tomb-quiet hallway, lit only by dim amber emergency lights. The main nurse's station was off to the left. Long corridors branched out in both directions. Mechanical room is at the far end of the right wing, the nurse said, pointing. You boys need an escort or can you handle it? We got it from here, thanks, Jack said. Should take us about 30 minutes to diagnose. I will be at the desk if you need anything. She let out a massive yawn and turned her back. We waited until she rounded the corner. Then Jack shot a look at Mike and me. Go. We moved like ghosts down the left corridor, heading for the west wing. My heart was pounding so violently against my ribs, I was terrified it was going to echo down the hall. We passed dozens of closed doors. Faint sounds bled through the wood, soft snoring, a hacking cough, the rhythmic beep of heart monitors. Room 307 was dead ahead at the end of the hall, exactly where the encrypted text said it would be. There was a small brass placard slotted on the door. Sterling C. Long-term care. Seeing Chloe's married name on that door, branded as a long-term psych ward inmate, sent a wave of pure, unadulterated rage through my veins. My granddaughter was not sick. She was a hostage. Jack tried the handle, locked tight, just like we figured. He nodded to Mike, who dropped his bag, pulled out a specialized lock-picking kit, and went to work on the deadbolt. In under 60 seconds, we heard the heavy, metallic click of the tumbler giving way. We pushed the door open inches at a time. The room was pitch black. A sliver of pale light bled from the ensuite bathroom. There was a hospital bed bolted to the center of the room, and underneath the heavy blankets was a tiny, curled-up figure. I stepped in first. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I crept over to the bed. "Chloe?" I whispered. The shape shifted. A low, raspy groan. I carefully pulled back the heavy duvet, and my entire world collapsed. Chloe was curled into a tight fetal position, so dangerously emaciated she looked like a little girl lost in the sheets. Her face was paper white. That long, gorgeous hair of hers was brittle and dead. Dark, bruised circles swallowed her eyes. But it was her arms that shattered me. Perfectly circular, angry red marks dotted both her forearms in deliberate, calculated rows. Cigarette burns. Some raw and fresh, others healed into nasty white keloids. Someone had done this to her methodically, over and over, for weeks or maybe months. "Oh my God," I choked out, tears hot and fast streaming down my cheeks. I gently shook her shoulder. "Chloe, baby, wake up. It is Grandma." She blinked in slow motion. Her glazed eyes struggled to focus on me in the dark. She was heavily sedated. "Grandma?" she slurred, her voice thick and confused. "You? Are you real? Or is this the dream again?" "It is not a dream, honey. I am here to bust you out." Tears spilled from the corners of her eyes. "I can't leave. They always catch me. They always drag me back. Not tonight. You are walking out of here with me, and you are never coming back to this hellhole. I swear to God." Jack stepped out of the shadows, keeping his voice razor thin. "Eleanor, clock is ticking. The desk nurse could do rounds any second." I grabbed Chloe under the arms and pulled her up into a sitting position. She swayed violently, the drugs making the room spin. I scanned the room, spotted a heavy bathrobe draped over a chair, and threw it over her shoulders, sliding her feet into slippers. "Can you walk?" "I think so," she mumbled. But the second she tried to put weight on her legs, her knees buckled. Mike caught her before she hit the linoleum. "I got her," he grunted, scooping her up into his arms like she weighed absolutely nothing. We slipped out of the room. The hallway was still dead quiet. We started speed-walking back toward the elevator bay, trying to look like workmen just hauling gear. That was when the voice barked out from the nurse's station. "Hey, what the hell are you doing with that patient?" The desk nurse was standing there, staring at us with pure panic morphing into fury. Jack didn't even break stride. "Code red emergency. The handler unit above her room is leaking raw freon gas. We are doing an emergency evac before she suffocates." But the nurse was not buying the act. She lunged for the red phone on the desk. "I am calling security command." "We don't have time for this," Jack yelled, walking faster. "If that ceiling vents, she is dead." She started punching numbers. We knew in about 3 seconds, the entire compound was going to go into full lockdown. Jack looked at me. "Plan B, run." We bolted, Mike sprinting with Chloe in his arms, Jack and I right on his heels. The nurse started screaming down the hall. The blaring shriek of the fire alarms ripped through the building. Strobe lights started flashing. We hit the elevator bank. I hammered the down button like a maniac. The doors slid open. Thank God the car was still on our floor. We piled in. Jack smashed the lobby button. The doors were sliding shut just as I saw 2 massive security guards sprint around the corner, charging straight at us. One of them screamed to hold the doors. The steel doors slammed shut. The car dropped. "They are going to be waiting for us in the lobby," Mike said, his chest heaving as he held Chloe. "Where's the emergency stairwell?" I asked. Jack's brain was running at lightning speed. Fire escape. We jump out on the 2nd floor and take the exterior stairs. The elevator dinged on floor 2. The doors opened to an empty corridor, but we could hear heavy boots pounding up the central staircase nearby. "This way," Jack hissed, pointing down a dark side hall. We sprinted, trying to keep our boots quiet on the tile. At the end of the hall, a glowing red exit sign marked a heavy steel fire door. Jack slammed his shoulder into the crash bar. Locked. "Mike, pop this, right now." Mike gently propped Chloe against the wall and ripped a crowbar out of his bag, wedging it into the door frame. I held my granddaughter, whispering into her hair as the sound of screaming radios and running boots got louder. "Almost," Mike grunted, sweat pouring down his face. The voices were right around the corner now. I heard someone ordering a full perimeter lockdown. Crack! The steel frame splintered. Mike kicked the door open into the freezing night air. A secondary alarm tripped, deafeningly loud. "Screw the alarms!" Jack yelled. "Move!" Mike grabbed Chloe again. We went flying down the exterior metal fire escape. We were 3 floors up, and the rusty iron rattled violently with every step. We hit the grass. We were around the back of the facility. The van was parked on the complete opposite side of the compound. "We have to hook around the east wing," Jack ordered. We sprinted across the perfectly manicured lawns. Floodlights were turning on all over the property. I could hear guards shouting orders. Within seconds, the front gates would be permanently sealed. We rounded the corner of the building. The van was 50 yards away, but standing directly between us and our getaway ride were 3 guards holding flashlights. "There they are!" one of them screamed, drawing a baton. We had no choice. We charged them. Jack got there first, shoulder-checking the lead guard into the bushes and ripping the sliding door open. Mike practically threw Chloe into the back and dove in after her. I scrambled into the passenger seat just as Jack slammed it into drive. One of the guards threw himself at the hood trying to stop us. Jack floored the gas, forcing the guy to dive out of the way. We fishtailed toward the front entrance. The massive iron gates had not fully closed yet. Metal screamed as Jack scraped the entire side of the van through the shrinking gap, but we punched through, and suddenly we were on the highway, doing 80 in the dead of night, my granddaughter unconscious in the back seat, and the faint wail of police sirens echoing miles behind us. "Are we going to make it?" I asked, my hands shaking uncontrollably. "We are going to make it," Jack said, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "We bought maybe 15 minutes before the cops run our plates. We have to hit the transfer point now." The transfer point was an abandoned strip mall parking lot 20 minutes away, where our clean car was stashed. A generic black sedan that could not be traced back to the van. We were ditching the heat before anyone could connect the dots. I looked back at Chloe, buried under a heavy blanket Mike had thrown over her. She was drifting in and out of consciousness, mumbling incoherently. But she was with me. She was out of that torture chamber. I reached back and grabbed her hand, that frail, bony hand where I could feel every single knuckle, and I just sobbed. I cried tears of pure adrenaline, of blinding rage, of absolute terror for what was going to happen next. But I also cried out of hope, because for the first time in months, my granddaughter was safe. We hit the transfer point without catching any heat. Jack ditched the van behind a rusted-out dumpster. The black sedan was idling in the shadows, driven by a woman in her 40s, Jack introduced simply as Sarah. "She is solid," was all he said. We laid Chloe across the back seat of the sedan. She was a bit more lucid now, eyes fluttering open, looking around in a panic. "Grandma, where are we?" "We are going somewhere safe, honey. We are almost home." Sarah drove completely off the grid, taking back roads and dirt paths to avoid the state troopers setting up roadblocks on the highways. It took us 3 hours of indirect driving to reach Dottie's house, constantly checking our 6 to make sure we weren't being tailed. When we finally pulled into Dottie's driveway, the sun was just starting to creep over the horizon. Dottie was standing on the porch, her face a mix of pure panic and intense relief. "Thank God," she whispered when she saw me step out of the car. Then she saw Mike carrying Chloe, and she clamped a hand over her mouth. "Oh my God, Eleanor, what did they do to her?" The doctor arrived within the hour. Dr. Susan Hayes, a tough, brilliant woman I trusted implicitly. She examined Chloe in dead silence, checking her vitals, flashing a penlight in her eyes. When she pushed up Chloe's sleeves and saw the rows of cigarette burns, her jaw locked in pure, seething fury. She pulled me into the kitchen to talk. "Eleanor, your granddaughter is in critical condition. She has been kept on a chemical leash for a very long time. Antipsychotics, heavy-duty benzos, mood stabilizers, dosed so high they would knock out a severe schizophrenic. She does not have any psychiatric disorders," I told her firmly. "I believe you, but her brain chemistry doesn't care. She is physically hooked on these narcotics. If we cut them off cold turkey, she will seize. She could go into psychosis, or worse, she could die. We have to do a medically supervised taper, and it is going to take weeks, maybe months. Can you do it?" She hesitated. "I can, but I need to know exactly what I am accessory to. It is pretty obvious you broke this girl out of a locked ward without court approval. If I get caught treating her off the books, I lose my medical license. I could go to federal prison." I looked her dead in the eyes. Dr. Hayes, they tortured my granddaughter. Look at her arms. She didn't do that to herself. Someone systematically, deliberately burned her. They held her hostage, drugged her out of her mind, and abused her. I broke her out because it was the only way she was coming out of there alive. And right now, I need someone who puts the Hippocratic Oath above the penal code. She stood in silence for a long time, staring at the floor. Finally, she nodded. I am in, but we do this by the book. I am going to monitor her around the clock, dialing back the dosages microgram by microgram. The withdrawals are going to be violent. Severe anxiety, insomnia, cold sweats, probably hallucinations. It is going to get very ugly before it gets better. But we are going to get her through it. Dr. Hayes stayed almost the entire first day, getting Chloe stabilized, administering the first round of step-down meds. She left strict protocols and promised to be back at dawn. Meanwhile, the real world was exploding. The news of Chloe's breakout hit the major networks by mid-afternoon, but the narrative they were spinning was a complete lie. I clicked on the TV and saw the breaking news ticker. Mentally ill heiress kidnapped from elite rehab center. Family pleads for safe return. The broadcast cut to a press conference in front of the clinic. Caroline Sterling was standing at the podium. She was dressed impeccably, her eyes artificially red, but not a single tear fell. Her voice was the perfect pitch of trembling concern. Chloe is severely ill, she lied directly into the cameras. She suffers from extreme bipolar disorder, with severe psychotic episodes. She was receiving world-class psychiatric care, and she was finally showing signs of progress. And then, heavily armed criminals broke in and dragged her away. Whoever took her doesn't understand the gravity of her medical condition. If she misses her medication, she is a massive danger to herself and to the public. The broadcast then cut to Julian, sitting in his immaculate living room, burying his face in his hands. When he looked up at the lens, he looked like a broken man. "I just want my wife back," he choked out, his voice cracking perfectly on cue. "Chloe, if you are watching this, please come home. We are terrified for you. Your grandmother is not well. She doesn't understand that you need clinical help. Please, baby, just come home." It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Anyone watching that broadcast would think he was a devoted, heartbroken husband desperately trying to save his sick wife. Then, my face flashed on the screen. It was an old DMV photo with a massive graphic underneath. Eleanor Mitchell, 68, wanted by police. Law enforcement is actively hunting for the victim's grandmother, Eleanor Mitchell, the anchor announced. She has been indicted for felony breaking and entering, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. Witnesses say she and her armed accomplices stormed the hospital, beat 2 orderlies, and dragged the patient out against her will. Aggravated assault? We hadn't laid a finger on anyone. They were literally fabricating felonies to paint me as a violent, unhinged kidnapper. Authorities warn the public that Eleanor Mitchell may be armed and the victim is in extreme danger. Call 911 immediately if you have any information. I killed the TV, feeling sick to my stomach. In less than 12 hours, the Sterlings had weaponized the media to turn me into public enemy number 1 and paint themselves as the tragic victims. Jack called me a few minutes later on a burner phone. "You watching the news?" "I am watching. The district attorney just issued the arrest warrants. You are looking at B and E, kidnapping across state lines, battery. They are pulling out all the stops to make you look crazy. What is the play?" "You stay buried," Jack ordered. "Do not poke your head out of that house." I am running down the evidence against the Sterlings, tracking down the whistleblowers, trying to flip a few of the doctors who know the place is a fraud factory. If we can hand the feds a bulletproof RICO case proving the clinic is a criminal front, it changes the entire narrative. But building a federal case takes time, and until then, I was a wanted fugitive. The next few weeks were absolute hell. Chloe's body went into full revolt as the narcotics drained from her system. She suffered through violent, bone-rattling tremors, projectile vomiting, and fevers that soaked the mattress. She had terrifying hallucinations, screaming at shadows in the corner of the room that weren't there. She suffered brutal night terrors, waking up thrashing and screaming, having no idea where she was. I never left her side. I held her down when the seizures hit. I wiped her face with cold towels when she was sick. I rocked her and whispered to her when the panic attack stole her breath. Dr. Hayes was a godsend. She came by every single day, sometimes twice a day, constantly tweaking the meds and checking her vitals. "She is fighting it," the doctor told me one night. "That is the best sign we could ask for. It means her brain wants to survive." During her brief windows of lucidity, Chloe slowly started piecing the story together for me. She couldn't talk for long without getting exhausted, but over the course of a month, the horrific truth came out. It started right after the honeymoon. Julian slowly started pulling the strings, cutting her off from her friends, constantly criticizing her family. Then came the vitamins he insisted she take for her stress, which were actually heavy sedatives that left her foggy and paranoid. "He recorded my breakdowns, Grandma," she told me one afternoon, tears streaming down her face. When the pills he forced down my throat made me hysterical, he would pull out his phone and film me crying. He compiled hours of footage, making me look completely insane. He used those videos to convince me that I was actually losing my mind. When they checked her into the clinic, they promised it was just a 2-week holistic retreat to help her detox from stress. Chloe signed the voluntary admission papers because she was drugged, confused, and terrified of her own brain. "The second the heavy doors locked behind me," she whispered, her body shivering at the memory, "I knew I was never going home." My room looked like a spa, but it was a concrete cell. No handles on the windows, doors locked from the outside, and the pills. Grandma, they shoved so many pills down my throat. The dosages were perfectly calibrated to turn her into a zombie, completely stripping her of the willpower to fight back or beg for a lawyer. When she tried to refuse the meds, they documented it as denial, a classic symptom of her supposed psychosis. And the burns. Dear God, the burns. "It was Caroline," Chloe choked out, tracing the scarred circles on her forearms. "She called it aversion therapy. She said the physical pain would shock my brain back into reality. But she was just torturing me, Grandma." She would sit there, smoking her cigarettes, pressing the cherry into my skin until I repeated that I was crazy, that I was grateful to the Sterling family, and that I belonged in that room. I sat there, listening to her, biting the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hunt Caroline Sterling down and inflict every ounce of pain she had put my granddaughter through. But Chloe didn't need an avenger right then. She needed a safe harbor. So I swallowed my rage and became the rock she needed. While Chloe was fighting for her life in that back bedroom, Jack was tearing the Sterling empire down brick by brick. He managed to track down 6 former patients who had survived the clinics, and all of them told the exact same nightmare story. There was a 22-year-old girl named Emily who was committed by her own mother so she could seize control of her trust fund. She was locked up for 9 months, pumped so full of lithium she couldn't string a sentence together. When she finally got out, her inheritance was gone, her friends had abandoned her, and her brain was fried. There was a 35-year-old man named David, committed by his cheating wife, who convinced the doctors he was a danger to himself. The Sterling doctors rubber-stamped the fake diagnosis to keep the insurance money rolling in. While he was strapped to a bed, his wife liquidated their assets and fled the country with his best friend. Every story was a carbon copy: fake diagnoses, chemical straitjackets, isolation from the outside world, and psychological torture billed to insurance as intensive therapy. Jack also got his hands on a massive data dump. A brave whistleblower inside the accounting department smuggled out flash drives proving the entire racket. Spreadsheets showing how doctors were given financial quotas based on how long they kept beds filled. Emails between Julian and the board strategizing on how to medically justify keeping perfectly sane rich people locked up to drain their bank accounts. "We have enough paper trail to bury this family under the jail," Jack told me during a late-night drop-in. "But we can't take this to the local cops. The Sterlings own the precinct. We have to go nuclear." Jack had an old contact at the Attorney General's office, Prosecutor Laura Jenkins. She was a total shark, famous for ripping apart corrupt politicians and billionaire fraudsters. Jack managed to get a sit-down with her. He dumped the files on her desk, the forged medical charts, the financial ledgers, the recorded testimonies from the survivors. When he drove back to the safe house, he was grinning ear to ear. She took the case. She is launching a massive federal RICO investigation. Medical fraud, false imprisonment, organized crime, the whole 9 yards. It is going to take a few weeks to get the grand jury indictments, but the Sterlings are going down. What about me? The arrest warrants? Jack winced. Technically, you are still a wanted fugitive. But Laura knows the whole story now. Once the feds raid the clinics and the truth hits the press, your charges are going to look a lot different. You might still have to face the music, but nothing compared to the life sentences they are looking at. It wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card, but I would take it. 3 weeks after the extraction, Chloe had her first genuinely good day. She woke up, her eyes bright and focused, her mind completely clear. She walked into the kitchen, where Dottie and I were having our morning coffee. "Morning," she said, and her voice sounded like her own for the first time in an eternity. I shot out of my chair so fast it tipped backward and pulled her into my arms. "Baby, how are you feeling?" "I am still a little dizzy. My hands still shake sometimes, but the fog is gone, Grandma. I can actually think." We stood in the middle of that kitchen and just cried. Dottie joined in too. It was a small victory, but it meant the entire world. Over the next few weeks, Chloe made incredible strides. Dr. Hayes was blown away by her resilience. "She has got grit, Eleanor. More grit than most people who go through this." "She gets it from her mother," I said, beaming. "My Sarah was a fighter too." 1 month after the rescue, the dominoes finally fell. The Attorney General's office executed synchronized SWAT raids on all 5 Sterling clinics. They hit them at dawn, smashing through the doors with federal warrants to seize the servers, the medical charts, and the financial books. The footage dominated the morning news. FBI agents carrying out boxes of evidence. Baffled patients being escorted out and transferred to state hospitals for independent psychiatric evaluations. And then came the perp walks. Julian Sterling was dragged out of his mansion at 6 o'clock in the morning, handcuffed in his silk pajamas. The cameras caught his face as they shoved him into the back of a cruiser. He looked absolutely terrified. Caroline Sterling was arrested at the corporate headquarters. Unlike her son, she didn't break a sweat. She held her head high, staring straight through the cameras with that chilling, superior glare, acting as if the FBI raid was just a minor inconvenience she would handle by lunch. Richard Sterling tried to run. The feds tackled him on the tarmac at JFK Airport as he was trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. Watching him get slammed onto the concrete in his tailored suit was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen on television. 6 doctors were indicted. 2 hospital administrators, 3 head nurses who personally administered the abuse. The media narrative flipped in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, I wasn't the crazy, violent grandma who kidnapped a mental patient. I was the whistleblowing hero who cracked open a multi-million-dollar medical torture ring. Chloe wasn't the escaped psycho. She was the brave survivor who lived to tell the tale. Journalists started hunting for me. They wanted exclusive sit-downs, tell-all interviews, book deals. I turned them all down. I didn't care about being famous. I just wanted my granddaughter to heal and the Sterlings to rot. 2 weeks after the FBI raids, I turned myself in, just like I promised the prosecutor. I was formally arraigned on felony breaking and entering an unauthorized removal of a patient. The aggravated assault charges were tossed immediately when the security footage proved I hadn't laid a finger on anyone. The Sterlings had literally invented it to make me look like a thug. My lawyer was a brilliant young public defender named David, who took my case pro bono because he believed in what I did. He filed a motion, arguing the necessity defense and the defense of others. "Your Honor, my client broke the law to stop a violent crime in progress." David argued passionately in the courtroom. Chloe Sterling was being systematically tortured, chemically lobotomized, and held hostage for financial gain. Eleanor Mitchell is not a criminal. She is a hero. Any decent grandparent on earth would have done the exact same thing. The judge, a tough-as-nails woman in her 60s, listened to every word. She also listened to Chloe, who bravely took the stand, despite still recovering. Watching my granddaughter sit in that witness box, her voice shaking, but her spine made of steel, detailing every single horrific thing that family did to her. It was the proudest and most heartbreaking moment of my entire life. When the judge finally handed down the sentence, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. "Mrs. Mitchell, You undeniably broke the law when you breached a secure medical facility. However, the extraordinary circumstances of this case, backed by irrefutable federal evidence that the victim was in imminent, life-threatening danger, severely mitigates your culpability. Given your lack of criminal history and the horrific reality of the situation, I am sentencing you to 6 months of community service and 2 years of probation. The felony warrants are hereby revoked. I walked out of that courtroom a free woman. Chloe burst through the gallery doors and tackled me in a hug. It is over, Grandma. It is finally over. But the real war was just beginning. The federal trial against the Sterling Empire took over a year to get off the ground. It was the trial of the century, dominating the news cycle 24/7. Every single day brought new horrors to light. More victims stepped forward. People who had been locked in those clinics years ago and were too terrified to speak out finally found their courage. The victim pool grew to 50 former patients, all testifying to the exact same nightmare. Families who had lost loved ones inside the clinics started demanding answers. Autopsies were exhumed. Police files were reopened. 3 patient deaths that the Sterlings had quietly ruled as suicides were officially reclassified as homicides after toxicology reports proved they had been deliberately overdosed. The trial was agonizing for Chloe. She had to take the stand. She had to look Julian and Caroline in the eye and recount her torture to a jury. She had to roll up her sleeves and show the courtroom the cigarette burns, explaining exactly how Caroline branded her like cattle. I sat in the front row every single day, silently feeding her strength, and she was magnificent, sharp, articulate, and completely unbreakable, even when the high-priced defense lawyers tried to paint her as an unreliable witness. Julian tried to play dumb. He claimed he had no idea what was happening behind closed doors, that he was just trusting his mother's medical expertise. But the FBI had his emails. They projected messages onto a massive screen where Julian specifically ordered the doctors to up Chloe's dosages because she was becoming too defiant. Caroline Sterling never cracked, not once. When she took the stand in her own defense, she maintained her icy, elitist composure. We provided necessary, aggressive treatments for severely disturbed individuals, she stated flatly to the jury. If our methods were unpalatable to the layman, that is regrettable, but our intentions were purely medical. This entire prosecution is a witch hunt. Prosecutor Laura Jenkins eviscerated her on cross-examination. She methodically walked the jury through the profit spreadsheets, the falsified charts, the survivor testimonies, and the covered-up murders. The verdict came down on a rainy Tuesday in November. Guilty. All of them. On every single count. Caroline Sterling was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for racketeering, medical fraud, kidnapping, and 3 counts of second-degree murder. Julian Sterling got 20 years for the same charges, dodging the murder rap but getting nailed for conspiracy. Richard Sterling caught 18 years for massive wire fraud and criminal conspiracy. The doctors involved got handed sentences ranging between 10 and 15 years, and every single one of them had their medical licenses permanently revoked. The government seized the entire Sterling fortune. The clinics were bulldozed. A victim compensation fund was established using the seized assets, paying out millions of dollars to the survivors whose lives they destroyed. When the judge banged the gavel for the final time, it felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in a year and a half. Justice. Real, absolute justice. The months following the trial were all about healing. For Chloe, for me, and for the dozens of survivors trying to glue their lives back together. Chloe stayed in intense therapy, this time with real doctors who specialized in PTSD and institutional abuse. It was a rough road. She had setbacks, days where the panic attacks and the nightmares came roaring back, but she never stopped fighting. And slowly, she started finding the pieces of herself we thought had been burned away forever. A year and a half after the rescue, Chloe went back to school. She enrolled in a master's program for clinical psychology, specializing in institutional trauma. "I want to help people who went through what I went through," she told me over diner coffee. "I need to take all this pain and build something good out of it." I was so proud I couldn't stop crying. She also started doing advocacy work. It was terrifying for her to step back into the spotlight, but she knew her voice mattered. Her testimony before Congress helped draft federal legislation that fundamentally overhauled how private psychiatric facilities are audited, creating massive roadblocks for involuntary commitments and setting up direct emergency hotlines for patients. As for me, at 70 years old, I found a new calling. I started working full-time with a nonprofit organization that helps rescue victims from domestic and institutional abuse. I use my story to show desperate families that it is never too late to fight back, and that one stubborn person can rip down an empire. We get letters every single week, families who survived similar nightmares thanking us for taking the Sterlings down. Desperate parents begging for help, getting their kids out of corrupt rehabs. We do whatever we can, connecting them with bulldog lawyers, private investigators, and support networks. Chloe also met someone, Ethan, a young history professor she ran into at the university library. He knows exactly what she survived, and he treats her like gold. He is gentle, patient with her triggers, and wildly proud of her resilience. When she first told me she was seeing someone, my blood ran cold. "Are you sure you are ready for this?" I asked her. She gave me that bright, genuine smile that I had missed for so long. "Yes, Grandma, and I promise you, this time, if you ever get a bad feeling about him, I will actually listen." I met Ethan for dinner a few weeks later. I watched the way he looked at her with profound respect, as an absolute equal. I saw the light in Chloe's eyes when she laughed at his jokes, and I knew deep in my bones that this one was one of the good guys. The Sterling family is completely destroyed. Caroline is rotting in a federal penitentiary, and she will die in a cell. She is almost 70 years old, and her sentence guarantees she will never breathe free air again. Julian won't see the sun until he is pushing 60 years old. An old, broke, disgraced man with no future. Richard suffered a massive stroke in prison and is paralyzed in the infirmary ward. People tell me I should forgive them, that holding on to anger is toxic. But I don't forgive them. I will never forgive what they did to my granddaughter, to the 50 other victims, or to the 3 people who died strapped to their beds. Actions have consequences, and they are drowning in theirs. Today, 3 years after that chaotic night in the Berkshires, Chloe and I are sitting on the back porch of our new house. We bought a modest, beautiful little place in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. It is tiny compared to the Sterling mansion, but it is ours, completely free of ghosts. Chloe is curled up with a textbook, studying for her finals. I watch her, her hair shining in the sun, her cheeks full of color, looking so fiercely healthy, and I can hardly wrap my mind around the fact that this is the same broken girl I carried out of that hospital room. "What are you thinking about, Grandma?" she asks, catching me staring. "Just thinking about how incredibly tough you are, how proud I am of the woman you have become." She smiles and shuts her book. "I only made it out because of you. You pulled out all the stops. You never gave up on me, even when I had completely given up on myself. I would never give up on you. You are all I have left of your mother. My mom would be pretty proud of you too, you know? Taking on the mob and winning. I think she would be. Sarah was tough as nails. She would have burned that place to the ground for you." I look at the faded scars on Chloe's arms as she reaches for her iced tea. She doesn't wear long sleeves to hide them anymore. She says they are her battle scars, proof that she survived a war, not marks of shame. This story, our story, isn't an action movie. It is a story about love, about fighting tooth and nail for your family, no matter how impossible the odds look. It is about trusting your gut when everything looks perfect on paper but feels wrong in your soul. If there is one thing I have learned in my 70 years on this earth, it is this. Monsters win when good people look the other way. When we see massive red flags and sweep them under the rug because making waves is uncomfortable. When we choose polite society over protecting the people we love. I could have easily kept my mouth shut. I could have bought Caroline Sterling's lies. I could have convinced myself that Chloe really was crazy and that I was just a paranoid old woman who couldn't let go. I could have told myself it wasn't my place to interfere in a married couple's life. But I didn't. I trusted my instincts. I dug up the dirt. I fought. And because I refused to sit down and shut up, my 29-year-old granddaughter is alive, free, and thriving. To anyone watching or reading this, to any grandmother, father, sister, or best friend who has that horrible sinking feeling in their gut that someone they love is in danger. Trust that feeling. Do not ignore the red flags. Do not let smooth talkers gaslight you when your soul is screaming that something is wrong. Ask the hard questions. Dig into the shadows. And if you have to, kick the door off the hinges, even if people think you are insane. Even if society tells you that you are overreacting, because you might just be right, and you might just save a life. At 68 years old, I learned that age really is just a number, that a retired widow can be a wrecking ball when she has to protect her blood. That bravery isn't about not being terrified, it is about being absolutely terrified and doing it anyway. I learned that the justice system is flawed, that billionaires can buy the cops, that doing the right thing rarely comes easy. But I also learned that it is always, always worth the fight. And I learned that a grandmother's love is infinitely more powerful than any billion-dollar corporation, any corrupt institution, or any obstacle the devil throws in your path. Chloe sets her textbook down on the table and stretches. You want me to make some fresh lemonade, Grandma? I would love that, sweetie. I watch her walk into the kitchen, moving with confidence, no hesitation, no chemical fog. A beautiful, brilliant young woman with her whole life ahead of her. And I know, down to my very marrow, that I did exactly what I was put on this earth to do. It wasn't easy. I committed felonies. I risked dying in federal prison. I spent nights paralyzed by fear of what could go wrong. But I would do it 1,000 times over. Because my granddaughter is home, she is safe, and she is healing. And the monsters who tried to break her are locked in cages where they belong. This is my story. The story of how a senior citizen went to war with a billionaire dynasty and burned their empire to the ground. Not because I was a superhero, but because I loved my granddaughter too much to lose her. And if I can do it, you can too. Whatever your fight is, whoever you have to protect, you have that same fire inside you. You just have to be willing to light the match. It is never too late to stand your ground. It is never too late to save the people you love. Do not ever forget that. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you don't miss our next video. Your comments mean the world to us, so please sound off down below. And if you want to support the channel even more, consider becoming a member. Your support gives us the resources to keep investigating and sharing powerful, true stories just like this, stories that demand to be heard, stories that could genuinely save somebody's life. Thank you so much for sticking with me to the very end. It means my story mattered to you. We will see you in the next video. And remember, never ever give up on the people you love.